Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the channel. At UFC 269, Sean O'Malley got a TKO finish over Raulian Paiva in the first round. And as soon as that fight ended, people were already asking, what is next for Sean O'Malley? So I wanted to go over a list of potential next opponents for Sean O'Malley. I have 3 opponents for you. I'm going to go from 3 to 1, 3 being the least likely, 1 being the most likely. I think the UFC will probably make. And at the end of the video, I'm going to give you my personal preference on who I think Sean O'Malley should fight next. And I'm also actually going to throw in a 4th wild card fight that I think a lot of fans would love to see. But at this point in time, I really think this fight makes absolutely no sense. But I think it is a possibility, so I wanted to throw it into the video. So Sean O'Malley, since getting stretchered out of the cage in his loss against Marlon Vera, has gone on a 3-fight win streak. He KO'd Thomas Almeida, he TKO'd Chris Montinho, and now he got a first-round TKO over Raulian Paiva. And I feel like leading into this fight, a lot of people disingenuously elevated Raulian Paiva so they could pretend like it was some massive step up in competition for Sean O'Malley. And if he got a big win, they could say, look how impressive it was over this really durable guy who fought the majority of his UFC career at flyweight and just came off a loss. It should have been a loss to Kyler Phillips. At the bare minimum, it should have been a draw against Kyler Phillips. So I just feel like people were really elevating Paiva so that they could pretend like this was a huge win. But don't get me wrong, Paiva's a slight step up over the competition that O'Malley's fought in the past. I've said it before. Before the Paiva fight, O'Malley was 1-1 against fighters who are currently in the UFC. And the one win against a fighter who's still in the UFC is Chris Montinho. So I think it's really time that we see Sean O'Malley tested in the UFC. And I'm going to give you some great options for his next fight. And I really believe whether you love Sean O'Malley or whether you hate Sean O'Malley, I think you can agree he's looked spectacular in some of these performances against lesser competition. And I think it's really time to move him up them rankings and let him fight some elite level competition. So the first opponent I have for you for Sean O'Malley is Song Yadong. Song Yadong is currently ranked number 14 in the bantamweight division. He's on a 2-fight win streak, and his only loss within the UFC really is to Kyler Phillips back in March of this year. He lost by decision to Kyler Phillips, but since then he's gone on a nice 2-fight win streak, beating Casey Kenny, and then he's coming off that TKO against Julio Arce. I think this would be a great step up in competition for Sean O'Malley. And even from the UFC's perspective, I think Song Yadong, a lot of people just think I'm this massive, O'Malley hater and I'm really biased against him. But I think Song Yadong is a winnable matchup for Sean O'Malley. He's lost to Kyler Phillips. I think O'Malley has better striking than Kyler Phillips. I think Song Yadong isn't really going to look to take O'Malley down and lay on him. And even if he does, I think the height advantage and the reach advantage should be significant for Sean O'Malley. I haven't looked that up. So I think this is a perfect opponent. And it's a perfect way for O'Malley to kind of break into the rankings and not fight a guy who's an absolute killer just yet. So I think that's kind of likely. I mean, I think all 3 of these guys on this list are very, very likely. But I just, based on the other 2 opponents, I think this was probably the least likely. So moving on to the next opponent. So when the Raulian Paiva fight was announced, I complained about it a bit. And I said the bantamweight division is the most stacked division in all the UFC. And I said that I thought the Paiva fight, there could have been a better matchup for Sean O'Malley that could give us more answers as far as Sean O'Malley's skill set. Even though Paiva was currently ranked number 15 when the fight was announced, I thought there was better fighters even outside the top 15 because that's how deep bantamweight is. And I mentioned this specific guy. And I think this fight is very, very likely to happen as well. And there's been some back and forth. And that is Sean O'Malley versus Adrian Yanez. Yanez is on a massive win streak. He's on a 4-fight win streak in the UFC. He's coming off that split decision win against Davy Grant. Davy Grant's super tough, super durable. That was a super exciting fight. And that showed, Yanez up until that point looked very, very good. And he still looked good in the Davy Grant fight, but he showed he had some holes in his game. And also, he's kind of in a similar spot as Sean O'Malley. He's this highly touted, up-and-coming guy. I know he's still not ranked, but I would still love to see Sean O'Malley fight Adrian Yanez, and what a fight that would be. Adrian Yanez's boxing looks really good. He has KO power. So does Sean O'Malley. Bantamweight is so deep that normally in a division you don't want to have up-and-coming prospects killing each other off, but bantamweight is just so deep that it really doesn't matter here. And that's why I think we can book Sean O'Malley versus Adrian Yanez. I think, you know, a lot of people who are truly, truly biased will probably complain that it's not a ranked opponent, but I would actually love to see that fight. And I think that's another winnable fight for Sean O'Malley. You look at it from the UFC's perspective, I think Sean O'Malley's a far better striker than Davey Grant. Davey Grant was able to land some good strikes on Adrian Yanez, but I think that would be an amazing fight, and I think it would answer some questions. Some people will complain, but I mean, who wouldn't love to see that matchup? Honestly, I think the vast majority of MMA fans would love to see the matchup, and two up-and-coming prospects, two super young guys, two guys that a lot of people think may be the future of the bantamweight division, and I'd love to see them fight each other. So as far as number one, and I really believe this is the fight to make. I thought, you know, I would have loved to have seen this fight in his last fight. I would have loved to have seen this fight at UFC 269. That's really a hint. And that is Sean O'Malley versus Dominick Cruz. Dominick Cruz is currently ranked number 9. My guess is he's at least going to move up one spot in the division after defeating Pedro Munoz on the same card. Dominick Cruz, former champion, arguably the bantamweight GOAT at this point in time as far as, you know, his career and his accomplishments. He lost the belt so long ago, but look where he is. 5 years after losing the belt, he's dealt with so many injuries, and he's still fighting some of the best in the world. Pedro Munoz is criminally underrated. Dominick Cruz weathers the early storm, almost stopped multiple times in the first round, goes out there and comes back, wins the second and third round, and wins the fight. And I think Dominick Cruz, being who he is, having his reputation, I think that this would be an amazing step up in competition for Sean O'Malley. I know there's been some talk of this fight in the past, and, you know, Dominick Cruz says, you know, he doesn't really want to fight back in the rankings, but these guys have to remember, and this is a reason I think it could happen, is when you have a guy that has so much hype, but he doesn't have a ranking, there's still a benefit to beating that guy. You know, Dominick Cruz would get so much hype if he goes out there and starches Sean O'Malley, honestly. And again, there's so much to gain for Sean O'Malley. If he can go out there and defeat Dominick Cruz, and let's say he defeats him in the same fashion he's defeating some of these other guys, I know there will be some naysayers that say Dominick Cruz is washed up, he's old, he's not the same guy. And again, he's not the same guy he was back in 2015, 2016, or even 2013 when he was really in the prime of his career. But Dominick Cruz is still an elite bantamweight. He proved it against Pedro Munoz, and I think this would be an amazing step up. Dominick Cruz's footwork, Sean O'Malley's unorthodox striking, his range, his power. I would absolutely love to see this fight. And honestly, the lead up to the fight would be absolutely amazing, honestly. So as far as my preference for what fight that I would like to see the best, I think it's really easy to kind of, from what I went, when I just went through that list, I think it's really easy to pick it out. I personally want to see the Sean O'Malley Dominick Cruz fight. I just think that would be an amazing fight. I know it kind of sounds like we're rewarding O'Malley. He's going to fight a number 7 ranked guy when he's unranked, but I think O'Malley's probably going to jump into the rankings around number 12 or 13 after this win over Raulian Paiva. Whether he deserves that or not, that's up in the air. But, you know, we have to kind of move these guys up, because people tend to turn down fights against guys who are unranked. We've seen what happened with Islam Makhachev. The guy was just far outside the rankings or outside the top 10. He got a win over Thiago Moises this year, and that guy's not, Thiago Moises, not even ranked anymore. And that win got Makhachev to the number 5 spot in the rankings. So we get O'Malley in the rankings. You know, he arguably deserves it. I mean, I would rank him above Cody Stamann and Song Yadong, and maybe even Frankie Edgar. Frankie Edgar's a little bit debatable. I would probably rank him behind it. But either way, he's going to get into that top 15, I would guess, this Tuesday when they update the rankings. And let's see him fight Dominick Cruz. You know, Dominick Cruz can fight another ranked guy who has a lot of hype around him. I would hope it'd be a 5-round fight night main event, and it would just be so much fun. And if O'Malley can beat Dominick Cruz, I believe he would be about 2 wins away after that from a title shot, maybe 1 win, depending on who that 1 win is. And I think that would be a phenomenal matchup. I think the fans would like it. You guys have to let me know in the comments, which of these 3 fights that I've already mentioned would you like to see Sean O'Malley take next? As far as the wild card matchup, and I'm wondering how many of you guys could guess this matchup before I even got to this point in the video. And that fight is Sean O'Malley versus Cody Garbrandt. Cody Garbrandt's the former bantamweight champion, but he's lost, 5 out of his last 6, I think it is. And he's been KO'd in the majority of them. I think 4 of them he's been KO'd. He moved down the flyweight, so it really doesn't make sense. He just got KO'd by Kai Kara France at UFC 269 as well. But there's been back and forth from Cody Garbrandt and Sean O'Malley throughout, the last 2 years or so. And they even had a little scuffle at the press conference, or at least got in each other's faces. I don't know if I would call it a scuffle or not. And there was some back and forth. And Cody Garbrandt may, after being KO'd at flyweight, he may move back to bantamweight. And, as soon as I saw Cody Garbrandt get knocked out, I said, oh, now Cody Garbrandt is right where Sean O'Malley wants him. He's like, you know what? I think I'll take that Cody Garbrandt fight now. I think it's a possibility. I think it would be a joke. I think it would be disgusting to try to feed a chinless Cody Garbrandt to Sean O'Malley. They're at totally 2 different points in their career. And I think it would be a massive mistake because say Cody Garbrandt, I don't think it's likely, but say Cody Garbrandt goes out there and knocks out Sean O'Malley. I mean, I don't think that really, puts Cody Garbrandt back in any discussion, and it kind of ruins Sean O'Malley's natural progression, where if Dominick Cruz can knock off Sean O'Malley, that's a decent win for Dominick Cruz, gain some hype and kind of move towards the top of the division. But if Garbrandt wins, I don't know what happens from there. And if Garbrandt loses, I mean, his career is already in shambles as it is. I think it would be totally wrong to feed him to O'Malley at this point. And I would like to see Cody Garbrandt kind of get a bounce back fight. So guys, let me know what you think of all this in the comments. Don't forget to like the video, and thank you so much for watching.